The document object model, otherwise called the DOM, it's a virtual representation of the elements on an HTML web page. Using the DOM, you can read the state of any item on a web page, and you can modify them and see your changes appear back on the page. The way the DOM works is like this. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's a language that tells a web browser how to construct the elements on a page. You've probably seen HTML uses this tag syntax to say that this is a heading and this is a navigation menu. Well, when a web page loads, the browser takes this HTML and uses it to create objects on the screen. So this h1 tag with some text inside it will be interpreted by your browser and turned into a title object. That object is held in memory somewhere and it's used to render this title element. After a page is loaded, the initial HTML has served its purpose, and it's these memory objects that your browser keeps around in order to maintain a representation of the page elements. They are the object model of the page document. You can interact with the document object model using JavaScript. If you open up the DevTools console on any web page and type document.getElement, you can see the auto-completion here gives you 5 suggestions of methods that you can use to get elements from the DOM. Document here is the document of document object model. Since our h1 heading element had an ID in the original HTML that was used to load this page, then we can call document.getElementById and pass in the ID of the heading. This will give us back the DOM object for this heading element as it exists on the page at the minute. Assign that to a variable and we can read properties from it, like element.innerText, which will give us the text that is currently displayed inside this heading element on the screen. We can even change that text. And then as soon as we hit enter, the browser will update it on the heading element on the screen. This is how libraries like React work. All of that JSX template stuff you do in React is telling React what you want to display on the page, and then React library itself takes care of modifying the DOM to match what you wanted to render. As we've seen, the DOM is made up of objects in memory, and the way those objects reference each other is through parents and children. Each DOM element can have one parent element and multiple children. Repeating this pattern multiple times gives us this tree or pyramid structure, where each element is a node on this tree. Indeed, DOM elements are often called nodes because they represent the nodes on this document tree. The top level of this tree is the document object itself, and that's what you access when you type document into your JavaScript. Here's an example of a list item represented by this li tag here. The list item has one parent, this ul, and it has multiple span elements as children. Now it's worth noting that elements don't have to have any children, they can just have some text, like this item down here. It just has some text and no child elements inside it. You're probably already aware of this, but all browsers have a DevTools that lets you explore the DOM with a graphical user interface. This is the Elements tab in the DevTools of Chrome. And you can click through this and you can expand DOM elements and even change them directly in the Elements window. Now these are represented in HTML, but it's important to point out that the HTML you see here in these elements is not necessarily the HTML that was originally used to load this page. As we mentioned before, the HTML that loads a web page is used to create the DOM, and then it's basically discarded and it's not used anymore. All subsequent changes to the page are made directly in the DOM itself. And so this view here, this Elements tab, this is the DOM turned back into HTML. So elements here have been through the process of being loaded into the DOM and then converted back into HTML so that you can view them in DevTools. If you want to see the original HTML that was used to load a page, well, you can do that. If you right-click inside a web page in Chrome and select View Page Source, that will show you the original HTML that the browser used to create the initial state of the DOM. And it might be very different to what you see in DevTools because changes have been taken place. Right, let me show you some of the things that you can do with the DOM. So here we've got some HTML that we've loaded up in Chrome. And you can see here it's created these elements on the page. So we've got a h1 heading tag with an ID of heading, and then we've got a paragraph tag with some text inside it. So if we go down into the console, we can create a variable and assign that variable to an element inside the DOM. So I'm going to use that getElementById again. I'm going to give it it's even trying to auto-complete it here. I'm going to give it the heading element. So now if I just type in heading, I'll be able to inspect my heading element inside this variable. And if I hover over this, you can see it's showing me exactly where this refers to on the page. Now I can do things like modify some of the properties of it. So if I did heading.innerText, then you can see that updates the new heading on the page up here on the left-hand side. So by modifying this, I can go in and I can change the text of my heading element just in code, in JavaScript. We can also get some of the properties from this heading. So one interesting property would be the client bounding rectangle, or the bounding client rectangle. So you can see that it's a DOM rectangle, and it's got the dimensions of our heading element. So it's got the width, the height, the top position on the screen, left, and stuff like that. So what we can do is maybe, I tell you what, let's update the heading and say the heading is X number of pixels wide. So how do we do that? Well, we go get the heading width. There we go. So the text now says the heading is 450 pixels wide. If I was to make this a little bit wider and run that code again, then the heading is now 507 pixels wide. So you can see that this is based on how wide the element is on the page at the time. Let's have a look at the paragraph now. Now the paragraph doesn't have an ID, so how might we go about accessing that? Well, we could give it a class name, or since it's the only p tag on the page, we can just use document got get elements by tag name, and we'll just pass in p as the tag name, and we'll get the 0th element by tag name. So that should give us our paragraph tag. And no, that didn't work. That's because I did get elements by name, not get elements by tag name. So if I did get elements by tag name, p, and we'll get the 0th or the first p tag on the page, print out paragraph, and you can see that paragraph is now referring to this p element on the page. And again, we could type, we could get the p.innerText out of that, and that will give us that will print out the lorem ipsum text that's inside it. What else can we do? We can also change styles. So let's go onto our paragraph, and in this style property, and we'll do margin top, and we'll give it a big margin at the top. So if we say margin top is going to be 100 pixels, then you can see the paragraph jumps down because it's now got a 100 pixel margin at the top, and we've done that with this style property. We can also do it with some classes. Now I've added a class into my HTML up here. So I've got this class called blue, and that's going to set the color to blue. So if I was to go paragraph.classList.add and add a class onto that called blue, you can see it changes the paragraph text to blue. And if we inspect the paragraph in the elements tab up here, you can see that we've added this class blue onto it here in our JavaScript. So I could do paragraph.classList.remove, and that will make it back black again. We can also access the parent element. So if you remember that every element in the DOM is like a tree, so our paragraph will have a parent element, which is the table. So you can see here, this is selecting the body, sorry, not a table. This is selecting the entire body. So if we go paragraph.parent element, which will be the body, and then set the background color of that. So style.background color. Make that pink, and the whole body becomes pink. So there you go, that's the document object model, or the DOM. I hope you found this video useful. I have videos on all sorts of aspects of JavaScript, of TypeScript, of general coding tips and advice. So please remember to subscribe to this channel on YouTube, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments section below. My name is James Charlesworth, and I'll see you in the next video.